안녕하십니까. 곧이어 2020
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to begin the cruise session of the 18th World Ocean Forum shortly. The interpretation channel number 1 is Korean, and 2 is English, and 3 is Japanese. Please take a seat. Thank you very much.
안녕하십니까. 제18회
Good morning. My name is Choi Min-young, the host of the cruise session of the 18th World Ocean Forum. It's a great pleasure to meet you. The cruise session will be held as a hybrid forum that crosses the boundary between online and offline, with online speakers and international speakers participating online. We are currently sharing with you in the real time on the World Ocean Forum website and YouTube channel in Korean and English. In particular, you can check the presentation material on our official website and also have a live Q&A through comments, so please leave your questions to the speakers. And now, Korean is channel number 1, and English is channel number 2, and Japanese channel number 3. Now, I would like to welcome Associate Researcher Yoon Ju of the Korea Culture and Tourism Institute, who will be leading the cruise session of the World Ocean Forum.
네, 반갑습니다.
Good morning. As introduced, my name is Yoon Ju from the Korea Culture and Tourism Institute. Great pleasure to meet you. Now, let us start the first morning session of day 2 at the World Ocean Forum with the theme of institutional restructuring for the expansion of the K-cruise market. This is an early morning, so I would like to thank the speakers and panelists and participants who are here with us. And after the pandemic, everyone says that the cruise market is resumed. However, the Korean market and the Asian market have not recovered to the level of the global average. The Korean market, regardless of the pandemic, is destined to have limitations in its nature. And our market is focused on the charter cruises, so the expansion of the market has been our topic for a long time. And I have been thinking about this topic while I was participating in the cruise sessions of the forum. And the option we have is the coastal cruise and the national flag carrier, which will be the focus of our session. So our presentations will include the institutional restructuring of the market as well. And on this note, let me invite our first speaker.
실장님 좀 앞에 나오셔서
Mr. Choi Il-sun, Director of Korea Maritime Institute. And let me introduce Director Choi briefly. She is now working as the director of the Korea Maritime Institute, and she studied at Oxford. And she received a bachelor and master's degree from Oxford, and she majored in tourism at Hanyang University, and she started working at the current institute since 2016. And she studies the measures to facilitate marine tourism and the leisure services. And her topic today is the 2024 Asian cruise market trends and domestic coastal cruise development strategies. And the Asia cruise trends and the strategies on coastal cruise will be covered in her presentation. And Ms. Che, please.
네, 안녕하십니까. 방금 소개받은 최일.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I am not an expert myself about the cruise industry because I work at local economy and tourism research department. So what I'm going to share with you is mostly about coastal cruise, which is one of the research projects that we're doing right now. And I believe that is the reason why I'm invited here. So thank you for the invitation. And as I said, what I'm going to share with you today is 2024 Asia cruise trends and strategies for developing domestic coastal cruises. So after pandemic, we need to take a look at the trend in the global cruise industry. So in 2019, the total tourists was 29.7 million, but that increased into 31.7 million. And the average duration in days also increased because it increased from 7.1 days to 7.3 days in 2023. And one thing that stands out is that the average age of the passengers was in 2023 46.3 years old, which is getting lower and lower. And if you break that down into continents, you see the highest number is recorded at Western Europe and North America. And the total passengers were 16.9 million in 2023. But if you look at Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific region, in 2023, the number and trend is recovering, but the Asian market hasn't really surpassed its record of 2019. And if you look closer into Asian market, in 2019, the total passenger was 3.7 million. And in 2023, it's 23 million. So it increased a lot compared to 2021 to 2022, but it still shows some decreases from the past peak. And if you also look at the average cruise duration and average age of passengers, the average days is 3 days, which is lower than 4.3 days in 2019. And also the average age of passengers, it was 46.2 years old in 2019, but in 2023, and going over the COVID years, 2021 and 2022, it got lower, and then it got up to 48. So if you delve a little bit into Asian market in 2019, we saw the domination of Chinese, the mainland Chinese. But in 2021 and 2022, we saw a sharp decline. But we also witnessed a partial recovery by 2023. And if you look at Singapore, which is in the far right, if you compare the figure in 2019 and 2023, we saw a sharp increase. And we compared the big data. Singaporean passengers showed the sharp increase. And in Hong Kong and Taiwan, after the sharp decrease in 2021, we are slowly seeing some recovery trend in 2023. And let's take a look at some characteristics in Asian cruise. So on the right is the average days, and the y-axis is an average days, and x-axis is an average age. And Asian cruise tourists tend to take shorter cruises. And if you look at the days, it's on average 2 days, and average age of Asian passengers is lower compared to other continents, which stands at 42 or 43, so it's in the mid-40s. So if you compare it with the other continents, the age is much lower. And the days are age is much higher and days are much shorter. So what are some drivers of this growth? Asian markets have a lot of attractions and with festivals and food, a lot of sources for great memories for passengers, and especially the mid-income population in India and China increased sharply, so they are mostly driving the demands, which could be an opportunity for our industry. And Asian countries are making a lot of investments in port facilities, making it easier for passengers to board the ship, and also cruise companies are offering a lot of good products for potential passengers. And government is also showing a lot of support for a cruise industry with a lot of system support and incentives for the industry as a whole, and they're making a lot of investments in infrastructure too. So now let's take a look at Korean cruise industry. So Korean cruise industry is fully recovering to pre-pandemic era, and it is increasing and growing. And 454,000 passengers already entered Korean ports, and as of the first half of 2024, and they're also spending money on tourism. And these passengers and the crew members are spending too. And in 2019, the tourism share also increased to 73.4% in 2023. And if we take a look at the data by port, you can see Busan takes up a really good share. And if you also take a look at the age group, the so-called MZ generation is taking this lead. So if you look at the graph on the right, you see the color orange, 21 to 30 passengers, and their ages 21 to 30 are taking this trend. The GDP per capita of Korea is 31,000, which is comparatively higher than other countries. But the cruise tourist is only 3.9, and port departures are only 14, which is quite lower compared to other countries like Taiwan. So the GDP per capita of Taiwan is 24,000, which is lower than that of Korea, but cruise tourists is recorded at 37.4, and cruise tour in 2019 was 39, and port departures is 220, which is much higher than that of Korea. And Malaysia, you can also see the same trend: lower GDP per capita, but much higher port departures and cruise tourists. And if you look at Singapore is leading the trend in Asia. They show port departures of 306 and much higher cruise tourist figures. So we have higher GDP per capita compared to other Asian countries, but we are not seeing much active domestic cruise population. So we have GDP per capita of 31,430. And according to a general trend, if GDP per capita is over 30,000, people start to take cruise travel inside their country. So it shows that we also have high potential, and it is high time that we started doing this. And this is about the growth of the charter cruise market. So in 2024, it is expected that 30,000 people are going to use the charter cruise, and there are also products that depart at some Japanese ports and Korean ports, and also it's around Christmas season, or some of the products are about visiting some Japanese attractions. And for example, it departs at Pohang, and it's under this Trotman on fire. It's targeting Christmas season, so it departs at Pohang and it goes over the Japanese Hokkaido area, and it takes about 6 days. So they have this product. And this is the current status of coastal ferry and passenger boat usage. In 2018, 19 million people used coastal ferries and passenger boats. And during the COVID era, you can see the downtrend, but it slowly started to recover over 2020, 2021, and in 2023, a total of 17 million people used the coastal ferries and passenger boats. So around 20 million tourists use domestic coastal passenger ships, implying that there are some demands for coastal ferry and passenger boats. So recently, Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism and Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries are joining hands to come up with some policies for coastal cruises. And they're especially focusing on Namhaen, which is south coast coastal area of South Korea. So they are focusing on operators and ports of call and products and profitability to make sure that they are promoting private coastal cruise products. And what you see here is what was announced in June this year by the two ministries. So you can see how they are targeting to promote the economy of the coastal areas through the cruise tourism products. And there are 4 strategies. Strategy 1 is expanding cruise port and tourism infrastructure. And strategy 2, enhancing attractive cruise destination tourism products. Strategy 3, strengthening promotion and increasing cruise traffic. And strategy 4, improving industry-friendly systems. And especially the strategy 2 is focusing enhancing attractive cruise destination tourism products to attract more tourists. And I believe this will be the focal area in the near future of the government. And this is one of the government's vision called Triple K Ocean Route. So using the yacht or boat, you take a look at these areas. So this is part of the ways to promote coastal area and economy. This is basically to promote the idea that South Coastal area is one big sea to take a look at through the cruise product. And this is also basically to promote the economy. And you can see Busan, Dongyang, Geoje, Yeosu, Wando, Mokpo. Well, these cities are part of this belt. So it encompasses major attraction spots in these cities with various products that can give you new experiences in these cities. And what we're thinking is to develop theme-based cruise products. For example, the flower festivals or sunset cruises. We can join hands with the core rail, with all these train trip products. And also, we need to make sure that we secure cooperation from all the stakeholders. So we need to first develop the coastal area tourism products and programs. And the relevant ministries must make sure that this is well promoted among people. And incentives and promotion programs should also be well established. And the photos on this slide is Japan's coastal cruise products. And you can see how it is a program that was made in 2016. So it's luxury, deluxe cruise. And you can see this hot tub and restaurant. So you can see this is kind of deluxe package. It's targeting the high-income families in Southeast Asia, and it's already fully booked for the year, for the coming year. So this is my conclusion slide. So in a longer term, securing infrastructure and securing financial support, and of course securing institutional support is important for the coastal cruise industry activation in Korea. And so infrastructure is mostly about making sure that the cruise ships are well anchored in a safe manner. And the local governments and central government, of course, must provide subsidy support, financial support, along with the discounts and other support programs for the tourists. And lastly, the institutional support is also important. So the current system that we have is not really keeping track of the growing trend of the cruise tourism because it's not offering any duty-free incentives or duty-free rate. So this should be in place. So we are thinking of implementing some pilot program in south coastal area of Korea. And I believe that this could be a really great stepping stone for the further expansion. And I believe fundamentally it's all about promoting the cruise hub and promoting south coastal area as a cruise hub in the near future. Thank you for the presentation. She said that she's not an expert in cruise industry, but no, I don't think so. I don't agree with her. She is an expert in cruise industry, so thank you very much for the informative presentation. And she shared with us not only the current status or the new trend in Asian countries, but also the very up-to-date policy update on the south coastal area of Korea. Thank you. And we'll go to the second presenter.
성우린
So I would like to introduce our second speaker, Mr. Sung Woo-lin, an attorney at law from DNR Aju LLC. So let me introduce our speaker briefly. Mr. Sung majored in navigation at the Maritime and Ocean University, and now he is a Korean maritime lawyer. And since 2018, he has been serving as an advisor to the Korea Cruise Forum and the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. We talked about the institutional framework, and today his presentation theme is the legal and institutional support measures for the launch of K-Cruise.
네, 안녕하세요.
Good morning. As introduced, my name is Sung Woo-lin, attorney at law from DNR Aju LLC, and thank you for inviting me to this meaningful event. So I believe that I'm here on behalf of all the maritime lawyers in Korea. And I worked as an advisor to the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries since 2019. And I gave diverse advice to the ministry, and I also served as an advisor to different institutions. I guess that's why I'm invited here, and thank you for inviting me once again. And the title of my presentation is the Legal and Institutional Support Measures for the Launch of a K cruise. So let's look at the illustration on the slide. And our main theme of the forum is ocean intelligence with AI. So I made this illustration using artificial intelligence. And throughout my presentation, you will see some of the illustrations like this, and it doesn't have the issue of intellectual property rights, so you can refer to these images made by AI. And this is the table of content of my presentation. In Korea, in 2015, cruise ship laws were enacted, and they announce a new law every 5 years. And for 5 major ports in Korea, we have the terminal and berth for cruise ships, and we are nurturing cruise professionals in Korea. Still, we do not have a national flag carrier. So we have to charter the foreign ships for cruise tourism. However, I believe that we have to launch K-Cruise so that it will be much more accessible to domestic people. The charter cruise method will have limitations in job creation and ripple effects of the expansion of the market. But still, we only have the charter cruise, which is a disadvantage for the Korean market. But I will talk about how we can facilitate the Korean national flag carrier and what kind of institutional and legal support measures are needed. And my presentation is based on the second cruise industry development basic plan announced by the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. So as I explained before, Korea has the Cruise Industry Act, which was enacted in 2015. And it has been around 9 years, but there has been only 2 rounds of revisions. And we have the stipulation which has the aim of fostering and supporting the cruise industry. However, even though after the 2 revisions, there was no related revision to this stipulation. And to introduce a national flag carrier, law should be the basis for institutions. However, even though fostering and supporting the cruise industry are the purpose of the enactment, there has not been sufficient efforts of the government of Korea. And to introduce and foster the cruise ship, we have the legal basis already in Korea. So we have the Cruise Industry Act, and we have the basis for shared property loans, and we have the special exceptions to the Immigration Control Act. And we also have the financial support basis for loans from the Tourism Promotion and Development Fund. And the institutional framework is already in place. However, it has been already 9 years since the enactment of the Cruise Industry Act. However, we have failed to introduce our own cruise ships in Korea. That is why we need to supplement the existing legal framework. On this note, the government and the National Assembly should pay more attention and make changes. And that's how we can bring about the actual introduction of national flag carriers in Korea. and we have to activate a ship financing. So according to Article 16 of the Cruise Industry Act, it says the state and local governments may implement necessary measures, including financial support to public institutions, associations, and other related organizations. We need the detailed plan to achieve this. However, it has not been sufficient. It has not been fully activated here in Korea. So we have two aspects of financing. The first one is policy finance, and the other is a private ship fund. As you know, cruise ship is expensive object. We cannot freely buy it easily. That is why individual capital will not be sufficient to buy a cruise ship. That is why we need ship financing. That will be the basis for cruise business, and that will be the cornerstone for the business. So we have the subordinated financing for policy finance. So for priority financing, they can use the vessels as collateral. So there is a lower risk. So that is easy to implement. However, in case of subordinated financing, there is no collateral and there is a higher risk of recovery of the capital. So this kind of financing is neglected hugely. In particular, Korea has never done the cruise business and has never made money out of this business. That is why financial institutions are reluctant to provide loans on this. That is why we need the government policy. The government should focus on job creation and local economy activation as the purpose of enactment of the Cruise Industry Act. So we need the revision in this direction so that we can provide proper support to foster the business. So we have the KOPC. It is a public institution under the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, and they provide investment guarantee fund to the ship owners. And we need a special article to make a proper institution for the business. In that case, financial institutions will be mandated to provide the proper loans for those businesses. And we have the Ship Investment Act in Korea. So they can loan the ships to the cruise lines, and they can provide dividends to the investors. And in 2002, it was enacted that for dividends over 300 million won, it was the subject of segregated taxation, and if it is below 300 million won, it was tax-free. However, later this stipulation was repealed. For general vessels, there is no tax incentive. However, at least for cruise ships, for the purpose of fostering a new business, I believe that we can provide this tax benefit because we have a clear aim. And by fostering the cruise business, we can introduce vessel financing. So I believe that it is a point we can consider for the activation of the business. Third, let me talk about the recruiting system for the cruise. So we have the Immigration Control Act, which has an exception for the limit of stay for foreign crew members. And we have Article 13, which is about the training of cruise industry professionals. So we have the legal foundation for all of this already. Still, we do not have the clear review process for the stay period of foreign seafarers. So only for ferries and fishing boats, which have been the focus of the legal framework, the cruise ship has not been clearly covered in the law. But for cruise ships, there are so many foreign seafarers, but they are subject to the existing laws which didn't consider the cruise ship. That is why we need another revision to the Cruise Industry Act so that we can make an exception for foreign seafarers working on cruise ships, so that they can have no difficulties working on the Korean cruise ships. Second, we have domestic seafarers. We never had a cruise ship in Korea. That is why most of the crew members at the beginning were foreign seafarers. However, when we have a national flag carrier, we need national seafarers, the Korean seafarers. And those professionals on board should receive proper training. And we already have the legal foundation for the training of cruise professionals. And we have to actively utilize these articles so that we can train the professionals in Korea who can work on cruise ships when we do have those ships. And we need concrete action on this matter. This is the fourth topic I have prepared. And in Korea, currently, we don't have K-cruise. Then why do we need the Korean national flag carrier? We can still invite foreign vessels. We can have Korean tourists on board and go overseas. But I want to talk about this. The cruise industry is a comprehensive industry. There are different types of businesses. It could be a maritime business or shipping business, and it is like a 5-star hotel, so it could be part of the tourism and accommodation business. So the cruise industry has a different aspects. So to expand the foundation of the business, at the end of the day, we need cruise ships. That is the essential part of the business. The charter cruise ship is destined to have limitations. So looking back on the pandemic era, we couldn't maintain the basis of the industry because we didn't have the cruise ship in Korea. We cannot develop policies when we do not have the Korean national flag carriers, and we cannot operate a business. That is why we need the launch of K-Cruise. The Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries developed plans to activate K-Cruise. The first one is the cooperative system. They want to establish a cross-ministerial council to support national flag carriers and regularly identify and promote support issues. And the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries and the Ministry of Sports and Tourism are working together on this matter. However, there has been no concrete plan to introduce K-Cruise yet. As I mentioned, we need to review the existing law, and we have to think about how to introduce K-Cruise and develop the business. I believe that we are at a crossroad now to think about it. The second plan is about incentives. The ministry would like to expand the port facility usage fee reductions for national flag carriers. And the local governments are highly interested in this. We have the Port Act and Port Corporation Act. And based on these laws, we charge the fee to use the port. And berth is a shared asset, and national flag carriers can have incentives on the use of a berth. And in Korea, the development is concentrated in the capital area, so it is hard to activate and revitalize the local economy of different cities. So at the end of the day, we have Sokcho, Yeosu, and Jeju, which could accommodate cruise ships. They are not located in the capital area. So if we make enough efforts in this area, we can revitalize the local economy. But the government needs to provide incentives to attract business in these different cities. And the third one is regulatory innovation. We need bold regulatory innovation to facilitate the smooth business for national cruise ship. And I'm interested in casino business. And casino business has a negative image because it is related to gambling. That is why the government has a strict regulation which impose limitations on the casino business. That's why when we enacted the Cruise Industry Act, we had a regulation related to casino business. However, the article itself was not perfect. So, by revising the act, there was a movement to deregulate casino business. However, it always faced a strong opposition. However, casino is not a mere gambling. Casino is an integral part of the cruise business. So when we look at foreign cruise ships, casino is a great source of income for the business. So when we have the national flag carrier, we need to repay the financial institutions when we take out loans. And we have to give incentives for the operators to do so. However, we are still staying in 2015 when we enacted the Cruise Industry Act. The casino was limited, but we shouldn't stay like this. And in Korea, we cannot operate a casino business, and domestic tourists cannot enter casino operated in Korea. However, when we have a casino business on board, domestic tourists could visit the casino as well. Otherwise, Korean people might not be able to enjoy casino even though they are on board. But if they are in the Korean territorial waters, so that is why we need regulatory innovation. That is required as an incentive for the cruise operators in Korea. This is the conclusion. The existing Cruise Industry Act serves as a legal foundation, but we need revisions and active review so that we can actively utilize the law. And cruise ship is expensive. That is why financing is key. Policy financing could be provided by the government in the format of the subordinated financing and fund. That could be the initial financial support for the Korean cruise businesses. And when we have the cruise ship, the seafarers are required, and along with the seafarers, the operators will also hire crew members, and we have to train the professionals in advance. And even though it is at an initial stage, cruise ministerial agency cooperation is required, including the efforts of the local government. In that case, we can develop legal and institutional support measures for the cruise business. Thank you very much.
네.
Thank you, Mr. Song. So we just heard from Song, and have been talking about K-Cruise, and Mr. Song pointed out the limitations of the existing framework, and he also suggested some measures. And even though onboard casino might require further consideration, I believe that we need a change of the perception, not only institutionally, but also culturally. It was impressive. And the cruise industry is a comprehensive business, so we need a new approach for sure. So let me move on to the last speaker.
모셨는데요.
So when talking about the expansion of the cruise industry, I also mentioned the coastal area cruise is important, but in Northeast Asia, depending only on coastal area is not enough. We have to always think about Japan and China because they are partners in cruise industry. So in that sense, the third presenter is Hayashi Yusuke-san, who's a director of the cruise promotion department from the Ports and Harbors Bureau of Japan. So he's joining us through online, and he's a really busy person. Thank you for your presence.
事務局の皆さんにはとても感謝しています。また本当はプサン
So thank you very much for having me here. And I'm really sorry that I can't be with you in person, but I'll make sure to go there in person next time. So I'll start my presentation. I am sharing my file. So do you see the file? Do you see the slide? Okay. So I really enjoyed the two presentations before me. The tasks in cruise industry are mostly similar or the same in Japan and in Korea. And that was a good reference for my presentation. So I'm going to share with you the recent situation in Japan. And I really hope that my presentation will give you something to think about. So this is the recent situation of cruise industry in Japan. From 2020 to 2022 was the COVID era. And you can see the whole industry pretty much stopped. And in 2023, it started again. And you see the number of crew passengers visiting Japan is 356,000. So you can see it's slowly recovering. And the number of port calls to Japan is also recovering, as you can see from the graph. And until 2019, the ship class was mostly casual class and premium class. But if you look at the situation in 2023, there are some expedition and luxury ships are also making calls, port calls. And you can also see some changes in trend in cruise ships. So the passengers of the premium and luxury and expedition vessels, they come to Japan by flight and then they go out through the port, and the number is increasing. And this year, the China cruise product, the ships from Chinese ports will also increase, and we're expecting higher numbers of port calls. And next is the initiatives for the cruise promotion of Japanese government. So they established the Japanese government's, they established the basic plan for tourism nation. And they set a lot of sub-targets. And the first target is number of passengers. So by 2025, they are targeting to recover to pre-COVID age, which was 2.5 million cruise passengers. And I mentioned 356,000 in 2023. So we're not seeing many Chinese passengers, but we see some increases in charter, cruise charter. So this number will definitely increase. That is our expectation. And the second initiative is the port of calls. And we are also targeting over 2,000 calls by 2025. And of course, we're seeing some level of 60% recovery as compared to pre-COVID age. And the third initiative is the foreign cruise ships call. So we're targeting 100 by 2025. And in 2023, we saw 92, and we are expecting this number will increase. And to meet these targets, we are doing some activities. And one of such activity is promotion of inbound travel. So we are cooperating with the local governments and the cruise ship companies to hold various events and fairs. And we're also thinking of participating in international exhibitions.
地元のエクスパート
To do that, we have to work with the local professionals so that we can develop the experiential program. So we are actually working in that direction already, and we work with the cruise operators and the local government, and among cooperation, among these stakeholders, they work together so that they can develop a new program. And we have to expand the consumption in different cities. So the ship operators and the local government work together again to stimulate consumption. And we can invite foreign cruise ships, and we can host events using local food ingredients. And we can provide souvenirs which could be also consumed on board. And the fourth point is the institutional aspect. And around the world, we have to build a cruise hub for cruise ships around the world. The cruise operators should be incentivized to invest in a facility for passengers, and they should be able to recover their investment, and it could be reinvested in renovating the facility once again. And we designated 10 ports for public-private partnership. And last year, it was Yashiro Port in Kumamoto, and the facility was renovated thanks to the partnership. And this year, the target is Sasebo Port. By doing so, we are looking at public-private partnership in both hardware and software of the industry. And as a result, last year, we had 20 ports of calls which were visited by foreign cruise ships, and the ports in red font were first visited by foreign cruise ships last year. And before the pandemic, those ports didn't host any cruise ship. For example, there is a small port in Setonai, and it is not well known to foreign cruise ships. However, we promoted those smaller ports actively, and we got this great achievement. And these are the pictures of the ports which were first visited by foreign cruise ships. On the right side, you can see the region of Totori. On the left side, this is the sand dunes, and people could walk around the sand dunes. And you can enjoy cycling in Shimanai, and we also have a Mitarai. You can walk around the 400-old city. It is a very attractive tourist attraction. And it was well received by the foreign tourists. And I believe that this charm of different cities could help us attract more foreign visitors. And as such, high-quality tourist attraction will unlock potential of the business further. That is why we have to work towards more active promotion by working with different stakeholders. And I talked about how to attract foreign tourists to Japan. And as I just said, the expansion of the Japanese source market is another challenge ahead of us. Still, Japanese people have this perception on the cruise, which is only for the senior citizens or rich people. So people think that it is exclusive for a limited age group or income group. However, by hosting cruise seminars and symposiums, we can change the perception, and we can invite people to have a look at the cruise facility so that more and more people could enjoy the cruise tourism. And we have a Japanit, which is a telecommunication company, and they chartered cruise ship called Bellissima, and their program is very popular. And now there is an increasing popularity of the cruise thanks to their work in Japan in general. And it will be a great cornerstone to expand the source market of Japan. So I talked about Japan up to now, but I want to talk about the promotion of the cruise business in Asia region. But we need cooperation within the region for sure. As the moderator stated, the demand for cruise program will go up. I believe that there will be more than 30% increase in the next 5 years. And the competition will be fiercer in our market. And by region, we have the different market share of passengers. It is displayed on the screen. And Asia has a very low market share, which is slightly over 4.5%. We have Korea, Japan, and Taiwan in the Asian market, and we have a great tourist attractions and we have a solid source market. That is why we have to work together so that we can expand the cruise market in the Asian region. That's why I would like to thank all of the participants. I believe that you can be our colleagues. Let's work together. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
네, 이제 방금 하시
And it was the presentation made by Dr. Hayashi Yusuke. Thank you very much for a great presentation despite busy schedule. And I believe that Japan shares same concerns with Korea. We are working on the inbound market. However, the domestic market has a lot of limitations. And there will be something coming up in 2028 in Japan. And he also emphasized the networking with the surrounding countries. So we are going to keep Mr. Hayashi Yusuke for the panel discussion. And thank you for a great presentation once again. And this is the end of the presentation session. Now we will take a 5-minute break so that we can arrange the podium for the panel discussion. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to see you again in 5 minutes. Thank you.
네. 다시 저희 이제 세 분.
Okay, let us start the panel discussion. So, once again, I would like to thank our three presenters. This is an early morning, and we do not have a big audience today. Still, the discussion on cruise is important, and this is the 18th World Ocean Forum, and the cruise session started 4 years ago. At the 15th World Ocean Forum, we started to discuss the K-cruise, and last year we talked about the potential as the port of call. And we still have many questions whether we have a potential to become the next driving force of the Korean economy. Still, we ask these questions ourselves and try to find an answer through this kind of discussion. And we invited 3 panelists. So we are supposed to have 4 panelists. So we wanted a global session. That's why we invited a Japanese speaker. And from the Shanghai International Cruise Business Institute, we were supposed to have Deputy Director Chiu Ling from China. However, at the very last minute, director said that she cannot participate in our session online. She wanted to participate in person. However, she couldn't, so she wanted to be here online, but she canceled at the last minute as well. So we only have 3 panelists. On my left side, the former Executive Vice President of Korea Tourism Organization, we have Mr. Lee Jae-kyung. Thank you for joining us. And Director Jang Woo-seok from the Secretary of Chairman's Office, Penstar Group. And we have Director Choi Jae-hwan from the Marine Leisure Tourism Division of the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. And let us start with Mr. Lee. So I've already mentioned this briefly. And Mr. Lee worked at Korea Tourism Organization for almost 32 years, and since 2016, he worked as the Vice President of GKL, so he has experiences in the public and private sectors. So I would like to ask your opinion. The Korean cruise industry, what problems do we have and what do we have as our opportunities?
자리 함께 하게 되어
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed your insights. So for Ms. Che, you mentioned the South Coastal Area cruise product. So this belt has been on our agenda for a long time, but the development process of any tourism product starts from domestic tourism that expands into the overseas product. So for further development of the domestic tourism industry, we need to focus on laying stronger foundation. And I really agree to your point in that sense. And for second presentation, so I can see how you have researched in this area. And for Korean cruise ships in 2014, 2015, Grand Korea Leisure Week paid a lot of attention to these topics. And you mentioned how it didn't bear fruit. And I was involved in the project myself. So for a casino where Korean nationals can also enter, we have some tasks regarding this. And maybe we can see some results in the future. And for the third presentation, Japan has better infrastructure, better facilities, and sometimes we're quite jealous. But one thing we can learn from Japan is how you join hands among the local governments and the cruise companies to develop some programs and products. So the end of the day, the tourism is all about doing analog. So you need to first have good content. So you are doing well in developing great contents, and I think that's something we can learn from. And what I'd like to share with you here is that cruise industry is closely related to tourism industry, and brand making is very important. And I always have high interest in the cruise industry, and I also read some books. But I believe we have a long way to go yet. 8 local governments, 8 cities have some cruise products. But a brand or a slogan can sometimes define a certain image. So hardware and system and infrastructure is important, but branding is also important. So that is what we have to work on. And I'm sure all of you know this, but all these global cruise companies have their own brands like Royal and Princess or Prince. So customers already form certain expectations reading these brands. They are quite certain that they're going to get this type of service from certain brands. So I believe we must focus on building these brands so that it can be helpful in marketing. And this is a software part of the story. And to add on Ms. Che's presentation, in April this year, Yangyang International Airport opened officially. and I was also part of this project. So 6 months before the opening, the Danta group, or people from Danta in Japan came to Korea to have discussions about designing the program. And there are many discussions, but one of the thing was about this back-to-back project in connecting flights from Yangyang to Incheon. So what customers, 150 to 300 customers mostly wanted was about shopping experience. So what can they buy in Yangyang? So these customers were curious about what they can buy, the things that they couldn't buy in Japan, and of course this is good news to local shops too, because it's a good opportunity for them. So my point here is that what I found during my research I read some documents made by Korean organizations regarding cruise products from 32 programs in 8 cities. So it usually takes about 7 to 9 hours. So 6 spots in Jeju, 4 spots in Busan, some spots in Sokcho. So this is the program where they have this plan for passengers. So if they visit the cities and they're going to promote some products and services, so they come in through ships and they jump off to visit the cities. But all these programs, I felt skeptical about the effectiveness. Will this program be helpful to the local economy? Because it seems a little bit detached from the real economy in the local areas. It's a little aloof from the real consumption that's going to help the local economy. So it is not sufficient in really helping the local economy and promoting consumption there. So the casino cruise that was mentioned, and other areas where local economies can be helped. But for any program to be really effective to local economy, it should be built on the consensus of the local people that it is helpful, and it should also be sustainable, because it should go on for some time to really take effect to the local economy. So that's what I learned from my research. Thank you.
네, 위원님 네, 말씀 감사합니다. 되게
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. There were so many important points. He shared his opinion on 3 presentations, And we talk about K-Cruise, and he emphasized the importance of a brand, which will be used to attract foreign passengers. And he also emphasized the importance of consumption to revitalize the local economy. The K-Cruise has various aspects, and he also talked about the analog touch, which is closely related to the local context. Thank you for your comment. And moving on, I'm going to invite Director Chang from Penstar Group. And let me introduce our panelists briefly. I started working for Harmony Cruise. It was my first career related to cruise, and he also worked there. And he worked at Hyundai. He was in charge of the cruise tour between South and North Korea. And Mr. Chang, you can share the recent interest of Penstar Group, and you can share your new business area. Good morning. My name is Chang Woo-seok. I am the director in charge of new business development, and thank you for kind introduction, and thank you for inviting me. And I reviewed the keywords of the forum, and K-Cruise and coastal cruise and national flag carriers were keywords. And Mr. Sung's presentation was focused on the reasons of why we couldn't develop the cruise industry in Korea, and he also reviewed the legal and institutional framework. And cruise has not become a full industry in Korea. However, we have about 25 years of history, and 25 years ago, Hyundai wanted to operate a tour program to Kumgangsan Mountain, but we didn't have the land route. That is why they resorted to cruise ship. It was 1998, so it has been already 25 years. And afterward, we had one event in 2006. I work for Penstar Group, and in 2006, Penstar Group bought ferries, and cargo deck was converted for passenger ships. So we started to accommodate coastal cruise. However, the business was discontinued only after a year, and it was 17 years ago. And the next episode took place in 2012. It was about Polaris Shipping. It was a bulk cargo ship operator, and the company established a cruise ship business, and they bought a second-hand cruise from Italy, and their journey was also discontinued only after a year because they incurred a huge loss. So all these three episodes took place almost 20 years ago. So we have this history of the cruise business in Korea. Even at the business unit, every attempt failed. That's why we couldn't develop a full industry. So I will give you details if time allows later. But on the screen, you are looking at the cruise ships. That's the ship we are building right now. And we call it a cruise ferry. And this is a new type of a vessel. And it used Korean capital and Korean technologies, and it is being built in the Korean shipyard. And next year in April, we are going to start the commercial operation of the ship. And we had so many ups and downs in the cruise industry in Korea, and we want to foster and basically resume the business in Korea. And next year will be the year of origin for that. So I talked about 3 failed attempts. And it was not until 2015 when we saw the enactment of the Cruise Industry Act. So it was enacted back in 2015, and the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries responded to this enactment, and they had this ambition plan to develop the market with 200,000 consumers by 2020. So I vividly remember their ambition. However, looking back on the past years, the policy goal didn't matter. It is the same as 20 years ago. We didn't see the expansion of the market, both quantitatively and qualitatively. The ministry needed the momentum to push for this policy. However, we faced a pandemic period, unfortunately. However, the pandemic era is over, and the tourism industry is witnessing a recovery. That is why it is time for us to think about what we can do, not only for companies, but for the government and local governments and communities rooted in the ocean. So we have to reflect on the past and think about the future. The K-cruise and coastal cruise are the subtopic of today's session. And we do not have Director Chiu Ling today, so if time allows, I would like to introduce the ship we are building. So can you display the material on the screen, please? So this is the introduction of my company, so I will skip these slides. And I said the cruise ferry, but this is not an academic term or legal term. And in the Baltic Sea or Caribbean Sea and Dover Sea of Europe, basically it is a transportation mean for passengers. However, their quality of service is on par with the level of the cruise ships. And they have stable business on that. So that's the target we have. So we refer to this model of a cruise ferry. So these are the digital image we have in mind. And this is the ship we are building. And the number of rooms is 120, and the passengers accommodation is up to 355. However, compared to the existing cruise ships, it has this luxurious touch inside. And we also have a banquet hall and bar and lounge, therapy room and gymnasium, and wellness centers. These will be all the featured facilities on our ship. And how can we define K-cruise? I believe that we have to reach consensus on the definition first. The students also study the difference between the cruise ships and chartered ships and every other types of ships. And have you experienced the Haerang Yolcha, the train tour program? So it is between Busan and Seoul, So you might use KTX and SRT, and ferry cruise might be similar to KTX and SRT. However, 해당 열차 program is the equivalent of a cruise program on land. So we would like to target the existing routes, but sometimes we would like to make a deviation, and we can have a 3 days and 3 nights and 4 days of program. And even though it is a transportation mode, we can provide the leisure and quality of services to the passengers, just like a cruise ship. And that was the starting point of our project, Pan-Star Miracle. And we have this topic of coastal cruise. And let me just briefly touch upon this one due to a time constraint. And this is the sailing route of a Pan-Star Dream. It is between Busan and Osaka, and we have 3 voyages every week. And we do not carry cargo during the weekend. It is only for passengers. And next year, in April, we will launch Pan-Star Miracle, and we have 3 categories of routes. Busan will serve as a home port, and we will visit other cities in Korea as ports of call, and we will visit Kyushu and Vladivostok and Shanghai and Taiwan. That's the itinerary in our mind. And the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries is planning to launch a coastal cruise in South Coast area. And even though the home port is Busan, if the chart owner wants, we can use Busan or Yeosu as a home ports. So that is the idea of a multiple home port program. So this is the end of my presentation, and if time allows, I will give you more information in the Q&A. Thank you.
네, 위원님.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. In the private sector, we made requests for further information, and for the past 20 years, we have had this history of the cruise industry in Korea. There have been attempts, but he also mentioned why those attempts have failed. And at the end of the presentation, he introduced the new routes they are going to operate. So when cruise is initiated, we have to develop the programs in different formats. It could be a coastal cruise, but we can develop other types of businesses in the process. But when there is an institutional framework, I believe that that is feasible enough. And I hope that we will actually see that route being operated. If time allows, may I add on to my comment? And we have a director from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. And we talk about the coastal cruise. And legally speaking, we have the definition of coastal, and we have to follow that. And I agree that we have to activate such business models. However, when we look at the geopolitical situation in Northeast Asia, and when we look at the map of the region, and Korea and Japan are too close to be separate countries. So when we operate a coastal cruise, I think it will be great if we can explore the territorial waters of Japan together. So instead of depending on the legal definition, we have to think about the actual demand of the consumers. So let us move on to Director Choi Jae-hwan from the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries.
올 상반기에 해양수산부와
So in the first half of this year, the Ministry of Sports and Culture and Ministry of Fisheries and Fisheries joined hands to implement some collaborative project. So we call ourselves the One Team Korea. So we invited him to represent the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, and he's the director of Marine Leisure Tourism Division. So he kind of crosses both areas. So I'm going to ask him to share his experience. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for having me. I really like the introduction. It was fancy, and I also like to thank the presenters and other panelists, and also the audience here. So the big topic here is the coastal cruise. And to take a look at some current issues, as was well mentioned by other panelists and presenters. So the global cruise industry is recovering, and recovering well, almost to the level of pre-pandemic. And we can also see this from the Korean trend, which is also recovering to the pre-pandemic age and getting closer to the previous peak. So we are seeing quantitative growth, but are we growing qualitatively too? And what is the impact to the Korean cruise industry? So the tourism industry is going through this trend change, and some positive impact from that will be some promotion to the local economy. And especially from the perspective of cruise industry, we are going to see more active tourism activities in port of call. And of course, we have to think about whether the profits are shared not just among the foreign companies, but also in the Korean companies. So in that sense, we have a long way to go. So we saw this from the Japanese presentation, but as for Korean ports of calls, we can't be the destination. We are just some ports of layover to get to Chinese or Japanese ports. So we are not getting much benefit from this trend. And also from the perspective of local economy boom, I think that's pretty much what I can say about it. And the growth of cruise industry should be linked to the global trend, should be shared domestically too. That's how I see it. And in order for that to be possible, Korean cruise companies have more or better resources to design better programs for Korean passengers. But one of the reasons why Korean flag cruise ships are not many yet. And of course, I'm not saying that we haven't tried. There are attempts, but there are some barriers. So the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries worked hard to activate the coastal cruise industry. And if there are some programs that are feasible, we can link them to other development projects, and we can also expand our work scope to western coast. And global companies and their products, they mostly come to some major cities in southern coast, but we can also promote other cities, some small or mid-sized cities to be included in that programs. And that could be a good opportunity to build additional infrastructure in those cities. So that could be a driving momentum for mid to small cities to grow further. So would it be possible? I believe the conditions that we have in terms of port facilities and other facilities are good. And port of call tourism, I think what we have is not that bad. Because Busan is getting a lot of foreign passengers, and Incheon, which is close to Seoul, is already getting a lot of tourists, and Sokcho, Yeosu, Pohang, Seosan. Pohang and Seosan is close to Gyeongju, and Seosan is also famous for some religious attractions. So each city has its own strength. And I also think the timing helps because we are slowly recovering from COVID age, and we're slowly going back to pre-COVID, and ministries of Korean government are implementing various projects. There have been a lot of announcements since June. And we also see some allocation of budgets. And the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries have worked on including the budget for coastal cruise, but we could make it. But we are still trying to include that next year. And we're also implementing a lot of pilot projects. And I do agree to some degree that we need to work on amendments of some of the acts that are related to cruise industry. But there are some regulations that we have to work on first. That's important, but we also need to think of some incentives that could be conducive, and I do agree. And there are some areas where we need to see more deregulation, and casino is one of those areas. So Gangwon Land is one exception that allows Korean nationals to come in. So everyone is talking about we need to build a second Gangwon Land on board, but I think we need to have social consensus first on that matter. Well, personally, I believe that is the right direction to go to, but that requires further and deeper social consensus. And it always takes longer for any act or law to be amended, to change. So starting from next year, the Port of Calls tourism program will start under the leadership of Ministry of Sports and Culture and Tourism. So I think that is in the same direction. Yes. Thank you for the detailed comments about each presentation. So the cruise program needs to grow, of course, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And you mentioned that. I totally agree with you. And you also mentioned these flagship, the Korean flag cruise ship. A good point. And you also mentioned how the budget was secured for the coastal area cruise tourism product. And you also mentioned this, that global cruise companies have these big ships, and it's really hard for them to come all the way into the small cities, but we need to have this infrastructure to attract them too, and that would also help the local economy. But policy should always be built upon the social consensus and local consensus too. So I think that pretty much wraps up the point. And I'd like to invite further comments.
네, 우선 최선 실장.
So let me first ask Ms. Che. So you had a presentation on coastal cruise. And from the perspective of expansion of the coastal cruise, we have the linkage with China and Japan. Could you give us more opinion on this?
네, 펜스타 위원님도 말씀.
As was mentioned by Mr. Chang and Mr. Che, for coastal cruise to develop and for the cruise industry of Korea to develop, we need to focus on collaborating with the global companies and cruise lines. Japan has this active coastal cruise industry, so we need to work further with Japan to develop some more products. And we need to also work with nearby ports to develop Western line, West Coast line that go all the way to Chinese ports. I think that would be really helpful. And maybe we can think of some MOUs to give some tax benefits to companies that develop the products that use these lines. So I think that would be part of the short-term solutions.
홍 변호사님도 추가.
And Mr. Song, do you have any additional comments? So it was a great discussion. I would like to thank the panelists. When we talk about law, I know that it is hard to revise the law. And before revising the law, we have to achieve the changes in the industry first. I agree. However, we enacted the Cruise Industry Act in 2015, which is 9 years ago. However, the application of the law was not sufficient, and I think the government's and National Assembly's role to review that area. And if we can develop coastal cruise and if we can launch K-Cruise, it will be great. So that's what I hope for. Thank you.
시간이 그렇게 많지는 않지만 그래도 오늘.
So even though we do not have much time left, it was a great presentation and a great discussion. And now we have more people in the audience. So is there anyone who has questions for our presenters or panelists? Yes, please.
성함 좀 말씀.
Please introduce yourself before asking the question. When I was young, I worked on the ship and I worked at Korea Register, and now I'm working at the shipyard. My name is Im Jong-sik. And I listened to the presentations, and now I have a better understanding of the cruise industry, so it was a great opportunity for me. But I have a question about casino. And it was mentioned that casino will have a great impact on the operation of the cruise ships. And now, in Korea, Korean people are not allowed to enter the casino, and the only exception in Korea is Gangwon Land, which is operated on land. Still, even though idea is there, we didn't have any casino on board. And when we think about the reasons why, it was mentioned that there is no social consensus among the public. But personally, I don't think that is the case. Korean people welcome the idea. However, the policymakers and lawmakers have a problem with that idea. It is allowed in other countries, but it is blocked in Korea. At least we can allow the level of a business which is being operated in other countries, because casino can generate a revenue for cruise business, but we are still blocking the attempts. I don't think that is reasonable. And I don't understand the comment that there is no social consensus on casino business on board. And the explanation is not sufficient from the government side. Because I don't understand what they are saying with the social consensus. And my concrete question is related to policy on cruise and casino. Yes, Mr. Choi?
일단 카지노 허가는
The permit of casino is under the authorities of the Ministry of Sports, Culture, Sports, and Tourism. So I don't think I'm in a position to give you the authoritative answer. But when I said we first need social consensus, is because, well, as you all know, some people are really critical about the idea of building second Gangwon Land. And there are some negative aspects, definitely, and Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism is getting a lot of complaints from a lot of people. So we are in the process of having discussions and reviewing the public opinion. And when I said the Korean nationals are not allowed, it's only in the territorial waters, and in open sea, anyone can go into anywhere. But coastal area is definitely within the realm of territorial waters, so we are having this discussion. So I think we need to see the public consensus on this first, because of all this criticism. And this could be a source of social conflict anytime. That's why I said we need the social consensus first. Yeah, that's a very sensitive topic, but thank you for the answer.
제가 마이크를 안 잡으려고 했는데
Today, actually, I didn't want to speak up. I work for penstarline.com. My name is Kwak Yun-soo. I'm the CEO of penstarline.com. I think your comment, Mr. Che, is somewhat faulty.
어디서
Well, if you're a Korean national, you can't go you can't visit any casino. It doesn't matter if you're on open seas or territorial waters. So you are gonna break the law if you go into casino. Or as far as I know, if it's just within the social gambling, then that's when I said it's okay. Right. So about this issue, if you're on a Korean flag cruise, then you are still in Korea. If that cruise ship is run by Korean company, is operated by Korean company, then you are still in Korean territory. So as long as you are on board the ship that is operated by a Korean company, a Korean national flag ship, you can't gamble. You still can't gamble. It's still illegal. That's what I wanted to point out. So to make my comment brief, Korean national on board a Korean flag ship. Well, of course, I know you are doing the review, but the problem occurs when a ship is doing the flag of convenience, using this flag of convenience system. And then when a Korean national is on board this ship, then what happens? So there are a lot of issues to consider. So you, Dr. What you said that it's a matter of just a tourism product, but let's say that I chartered a Panther cruise to attract 10,000 passengers for a month. So if let's say if they spend $1 million, each one spends $1 million, then that will be 10 billion, right? So that is the money we're talking about. And Mr. Che, you said you are seeing 30,000 passengers size. So that's much bigger money, right? So if this ship is not a Korean flag, then we are now talking about some leak of economy, leak of money. And that's why we have to have the Korean flag cruise ship. So I do agree that we need to have more Korean flag cruise ships. And casino will play a central role in turning around the profitability of those ships. So this is really urgent matter, and I really want the government to take this seriously. Yes, I do agree that casino is something that we can't ignore or evade when we talk about cruise industry promotion and economy and everything. So yes, there is a demand, urgent demand from private sector. And we need more discussions, definitely, but we're running out of time, so maybe we'll take the last question or comment from the audience.
간단하게만 좀 부탁을 드리겠습니다.
그냥 자연스럽게 포장하시고 계셔서
아, 지금 먹어도 돼요?
지금
아, 네. 이렇게 오늘 오전 크루즈